conscious effort to dress him, Smith, in red?
It's there were a lot of sort of influences. The red makes him more of a cartoonish, memorable character, and he's almost always wearing that so that he stands out. And then, of course, red, symbolizes evil and death and blood and everything else. So, yeah, it was sort of, notice it sort of has a comic book feel to it.
Right.
So we wanted that to be really obviously memorable, his image.
So, so first of all, thanks for kind of putting a bunch of work into bringing an analogy to life that I think a lot of us have thought. But as Gary Vee says, ideas are shit, right? So yeah, it's what you do with them, and you've obviously done something fantastic. But my main question watching it was, obviously there's some obvious fourth wall breaks in there, but as far as kind of like on the nose of the spectrum of on the nose, how much did you think about that, and how much were you like, if I don't like really hit them in the face with this, then a lot of just say your average person off the street isn't going to understand it?
Yeah, that's always a challenge, because trying to make something for a gigantic audience with a huge spectrum of awareness, from absolutely oblivious to everything about the world they live in to kind of knows pretty much or all the way understands, wherever you do it, it's going to be too obvious for some people and too obscure for other people. So a lot of that, and the funny thing is, I think there are parts in it that are really obvious for some people, like everybody here is going to catch much of it. There are pieces in it that are even not all that obvious, that when people watch it again and then a third time they go, oh, I didn't notice, that was intentional, wasn't it? So yeah, we decided early on we wanted it to be pretty much in your face and obvious, to the point that nobody's going to miss the allegory of what it's about, even though it's taking place in this fictional setting, kind of sort of slightly fictional, but not really. So there was, with a bunch of scenes, there was the back and forth of how much do we want to just punch people in the face with this, and how much do we want to make it subtle. And our solution to that was basically make a bunch of both along the whole spectrum, so that, even the densest person is going to notice some of it, and the people not so dense on the second and third watchings will notice, oh, there was even more to it than the obvious stuff. So, but yeah, that's always a challenge of what level of glaringly obvious do you make it.
Larkin, Carlos, Beltran, hey. So first of all, you all lost the game. And the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was I feel like this storyline, the story that you're putting in here, you've said it several times in talks that you've had in the past that I've listened to. So am I correct that I remember you giving this almost exact analogy at different points in the past?
Yeah, and this is based on a 10-minute or so long animation thing that I did 12 years ago. And the director, Andrew Tregley, it was actually his idea to make it into a movie. He was interviewing me about something completely different when we met down in Mexico. And I mentioned my Little Jones Plantation animated. It doesn't even count as animated, it's just still illustrations. And he watched that, and him and his assistant director, Doug, immediately said, we should make that into... First they said, we should make that into a short. And then about 5 seconds later, we were we can't fit this in a short. We'd like you to fit in an hour and a half.
The timing was interesting, because that was the Anarchapulco that we went to and met Andrew at, but that was the Anarchapulco right before that was February 2020. So they were talking about stuff in the news, but a lot of us were basically if you had talked to a lot of the anarchists at Anarchapulco, we were all let's wait and see if they keep harping on this. Is this going to be a thing to give up on? I don't know, or how long is this going to go on? This seems really weird. They were starting to talk about it a lot, but they weren't going into the full crazy yet. And then Andrew meets you in Mexico, and he's like, we should make this into a movie. And then Larkin found out that Andrew lives in Phoenix, and they had no idea when they met in Mexico that we're in Phoenix, Arizona, and Andrew's in Phoenix, Arizona. So Andrew's like, wait, I'm in Phoenix, what? We have to make this movie, you're right there. So when we go back, we're gonna start this.
So we went back and it's the beginning of 2020, and then all of a sudden all the bullshit ramps up everywhere. And we're like, okay, guess we really have to keep going this whole time and keep trying to make this happen. But it got really weird because with all of that, Andrew's going out and trying to find actors for this, right? And he's trying to like kind of reach out to like maybe SAG or others or whatever, and actors that are in the Screen Actors Guild, right? And SAG is this big corporation that is all left owned, right? So they were immediately like, anyone that's Screen Actors Guild, our movies have certain parameters, and if everyone has to wear masks on set and be COVID tested, and like they're saying all these things, and it's like, okay, well that's that world, and we can't go into that world, and we can't like let them like we can't do a SAG approved movie. But if we want good actors, we're gonna have to talk to actors that may or may not have a SAG card. And the way the Screen Actors Guild works is they would demonize these actors for all of this crap happening and say, you can't go work for a movie that isn't SAG. So the actors are trying, so they're telling everyone you can't work and they have all this BS, but then the actors out there, they're like, okay, I wanna go get work, and the only work I can freaking find that's willing to hire me right now and pay me is something like this. But they have to risk their Screen Actors Guild card in order to do that. They have to basically be willing to like risk SAG saying we'll never ever hire you now. Like the big wigs that would pay them a bunch of money, they have to be willing to be paid a crappy amount of money by this tiny little indie movie and risk their whole Screen Actors Guild card.
Yeah.
And we had a couple actors that are here that were really good, and they did actually have active SAG cards that they were like, fuck it. They saw the script and they were like, I'm doing this movie.
Yeah.
So it was
And their
really
other
hard.
choice was to have no work.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and it was
Because
a lot of
everything
like,
else
a
is
lot
shut
of
down.
miracles had to come together that felt like this is one miracle after another happening to pull this off, because it feels like this is almost going to be impossible to pull off, sort of a thing. Like that's how I took it from what you guys were telling me about
Yeah.
the whole process of shooting. So
There were a lot of ridiculous things that happened that just barely worked. When we were done shooting, we were like, well, I guess when we start editing, we'll see if we have a movie. But we didn't even know. There was just so many challenges and nightmares that hopefully you can tell. Can anybody tell that there were a million challenges to make that happen? And the script changed a billion times, and we changed scenes and changed everything all over the place, and just barely. The whole shoot was 2.5 weeks.
wow.
And when we were doing the outdoors, it was at 2 different slave plantations, former slave plantations. They don't do it openly anymore. They call it something else, which is kind of the point of the movie. But we had an interior over in Natchez, Mississippi, the big house you see on there, and then the exteriors were at Frogmore Plantation over in Faraday, Louisiana, and with our luck, in Mississippi it was 20 degrees the whole time doing the outdoor shoot and drizzling half the time. You're like, it's never this cold in Mississippi. So if you watch carefully, a couple times you can see their breath. Mostly you can't tell, and you can't tell that like you're shooting one side of that old church that they're sitting in. All their winter coats are just out of frame on the other side. So we set everything up and we get it. Okay, we're all set. Pile your coats, go sit down, shoot it. And then, okay, cut. Everybody runs back to get to their coats.
So everyone was sick at the end of shooting? Just nobody's immune systems can handle that repeatedly, like not get sleep, constantly shivering in 20-degree weather with no. A lot of people came from like California. A couple people came from like California, I think, or other places where they were like, "Oh, is Mississippi having a cold snap?" I didn't bring a jacket, so it was an actual real struggle for a bunch of what happened.
Yeah.
including not
Andrew and I
not to
both
mention
had
these guys.
no immune system from sleep deprivation by the end of the shoot. We drove in a stupid little clown car from Phoenix to the shoot with a snake in a box. That's our snake that you see in the.
Really?
That's Snakey.
That's my pet's name.
So in the credits, if you watch carefully, I'm listed as Snake Wrangler, among other things. That was actually a job. I was, for some of the shots, I'm just out of frame, like holding a steak, and then I hand it to Maurice, who plays Mr. Smith, who was not really used to holding.
And then he drops to the floor. So like, there's this scene where Mr. Smith is like giving this
So he's on
majestic
his couch.
discussion, and Larkin's just on the floor,
Just
like
lying on
right
the
there,
floor,
just
just out of
below the
frame.
cameras, right?
So there's lots of that fun stuff that you don't get to know is happening from watching the movie. But yeah, it was ridiculous.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Joe. As much as I enjoyed The Sound of Freedom, I think your film has more of a message that the country needs. And I know that's a con, but the question is about, there was just one cut scene where you show a red river. And I'm wondering if that might be an homage to The Shining.
No, although it was totally a reference to, the thing is, we had a bunch of footage that Doug got with the drone while we were there, or multitasking all over the place. And he decided to it's right before they find the little girl's dead body. So he's like, we already have the river shot, I'm just gonna change the coloring of it and make it red. But it is, you know, I will have to ask Andrew if he, because I totally know what you mean, but the door's opening and the river.
That might have been something a little in Andrew's head, like, you
So
know,
maybe Andrew
because
has,
a
like,
director or
he's
something.
actually a director and like way into cinema and stuff, so maybe, but, he's running the microphone.
Yeah, as Kanye was seeing this film, because if not, he needs to. They're talking about sort of the Black Israelites and the 13th Amendment being, well, making us all slaves. So, like pushing it.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people that I think, even mainstream people, and you know, Kanye might be one, and who aren't at all what I would, you know, they're not nearly voluntarist yet, but I bet they would think about it and they would talk about it if they saw it. I think that's true of everyone from Joe Rogan to everybody else. I can't imagine them like not saying anything about it. And that's really what I want to see, is just the discussion start. And it's been fun to get feedback from people who like didn't. By the way, most of the crew and cast didn't know who I was when we started. We had never met until we were on the set to shoot a movie, and they didn't know anything about volunteerism. So they made this movie. So the first glimpse I got of what's this going to look like to normal people were the people making it. Yeah. Like, oh wow, this is because it was new to them, and that there were some fun little conversations of that.
Their reactions to the script, I think, were kind of fun, right?
Yeah. Samuel, JJ. Oh, I think it still says it. JJ Green, who played Samuel, we had some fun short discussions of the, and he was just amazing. That final speech he gives, he got the final version of that the day we shot it, and delivered it like 3 times in a row flawlessly. And because we had kept changing things and things would move over there, and it was just a nightmare. But a lot of people who read the script were like, we haven't seen a script like this. We've seen lots of things, but this is rather different.
My favorite thing to hear was that everyone was saying they had never seen it before.
Yeah.
And that's like a thing that, it feels like this is a really ripe time for this movie to actually kind of catch on and get seen and have people think about it. And I think it's because so many people are disillusioned with what happens when like art and government infused shitty big money makes movies. Like
Yeah.
that's what's happened, and they're realizing like there's no originality anymore. Everything sucks. It's bloated. They're expensive movies that are absolute trash. So there's this thirst in the art world, I think, for something that actually is original. And if that's alone all that gets somebody to click on, like, I'm gonna try and see what this movie Jones Plantation's about, then anything to get them to look, if they're starved for originality, then freaking great.
Yeah, and like Maurice said, and the guy who knows Mr. Smith said in interviews, he's like, you've seen plenty of slave movies. You haven't seen this. This is not what you're expecting. Whatever you're expecting, this isn't it.
Yeah, you know, go ahead. Kind of a smaller one. Is there any significance to cypress trees?
No.
You said they're
Is-
as calm as cypress trees, and it just felt like there was something behind that I was missing.
No, it's funny. I wish there was. I've had a few people guess things that we didn't intend, but make sense, and I'm like, okay, let's pretend we did that on purpose. And then a few people guessed the things that that were intentional, because there's a bunch of them too. Cypress trees, not in particular. No.
Question: does this film has closed captains? Because for me it was quite difficult to understand several phrases.
Yeah, we're doing a thing. Not only are we gonna have like subtitles for English, but we already have a number of people saying, I want to do subtitles for this language and that language and the other language to get them
And
done.
because of that, I actually completely lost what is the benefit for Mr. Smith of what he is doing.
He just got paid a lot.
Okay.
That's why early on, he's like, you're aware of my fee, and Mr. Jones says, yeah, I know how much you cost, but, and if this other plantation owner hadn't told me you're worth every penny, I never would have called on you. So he just gets paid to do this.
And of course, he's a psychopath that gets off on doing this, so he gets off on control.
Well-paid psychopath who likes to play the game.
My question would be, why did you choose cotton plantation versus any other plantation? Because there, are a lot of plantations that have lots of goods, but you chose the cotton.
Cotton is sort of the cliche that everybody thinks of when they think of slavery, even though you're right, it wasn't like there's a zillion other things they did. At that particular one, it was sort of, well, I don't know how much I should give this away. Andrew complains when I give away how little cotton there was there. It used to be a huge cotton plantation. The director of photography had to be very creative to make it look like we actually had huge fields of cotton, because we didn't, but we had a little bit. And at one point we were thinking of making it be something different, and we thought there are certain things that we want to be cliche, and the cotton plantation is so cliche that we sort of, even though you're right, that's not the only thing where slavery happened, we decided to keep that cliche because it's sort of visually obvious to everybody, and everybody already has that trope in their head. Probably misusing that word, but whatever.
At the risk of sounding like one of the dense people that you mentioned earlier, I'm not sure that I entirely understood Mr. Smith's literal self-flagellation. What was the thinking behind that?
That was the thing that Andrew and I went back and forth on a little bit, because I didn't want people to come away with the conclusion that, oh, so it's all about like Satanism or the dark occult or something. But I did want something included in there. It isn't like the punchline of the movie, but basically to suggest to people, however demented you think the people in power are, it's probably way worse. And I didn't want that to be the focal point, but I was okay with dropping that in there so people go, okay, so he isn't just sort of clever politician, he's like something dreadfully horrible. And I think that has been true of a whole lot of very powerful people, and a bunch of it isn't secret, like the Skull and Bones Club. That's not a secret, that's not a conspiracy, that's reality. Hitler was into the dark occult, and there's a whole bunch of this twisted stuff, so we wanted to sort of drop that in there. And I know there's tons of people who get all into that and dive into that and learn all about that, and it wasn't my intention to make that the focus, but I'm perfectly okay having people go, just how screwed up are these people? Like, is it just they're greedy and they don't care? Is it something way worse? And sadly, it's way worse.
Oh, and do you want to point out the reason that you don't like people to get hung up on like the Satanism or the dark occult, or what they do in private with their religious beliefs and their practices? Do you want to clarify why you don't like to get caught up on that?
Yeah, mainly because to me, on a practical level, it doesn't matter whether people understand that or not. If people give up the belief in authority and stop bowing to them, a lot of the conspiracies, it doesn't matter if people ever, like, they fall apart whether or not people ever know they were happening. Like the currency thing that we obviously mentioned in there. Most people in here presumably know how the Federal Reserve works and that whole scam. Most of the rest of the world doesn't know. The thing is, if people stop bowing to government and stop going along with what they do, they don't even need to know how that worked in order for it to fall over. I'm not against them knowing it, but if people like remove their consent and cooperation, all of those schemes and actual conspiracies fall apart anyway, which is why I don't focus so much in this or anything else I do on like the nitpicky details of every conspiracy, of which there are many and they're real. I mean, there's a bunch that aren't real too, but there's plenty of evil stuff that, yes, they absolutely planned and conspired to do that. But I usually don't focus on that because that isn't the solution, and a lot of people just sort of get bummed out and depressed and horrified and like, well, now what do I do? And I think the answer is actually somewhere else.
Hi, my name is Toby. It sounds like a lot of fun to make, and I'm wondering when the sequel is.
Fun isn't the right word.
Suffering horribly.
he feels accomplished now.
It's fun to have it done. I can definitely
Yeah.
say that. It's
Yes.
fun to have it done.
It's fun doing this part, like getting to watch everyone else get to react to it, because it's that whole feeling of like when I watched the rough cut with Larkin in Andrew's apartment after he shut himself in his apartment for 7 months, I was like, oh my God, we have a movie. And I don't,
How did you
and
do
I
that?
know some of the stories behind what was happening, and I know that you had to be an editing god to pull this off. Oh my God. And so I watched it, but it's that feeling of like, you're so close to something from being up close to its creativity, and I know a lot of you artists will get this, you just have that feeling of like, I think it's as good as I think it is. And I still have to wait to see everybody else react to this to like actually know. And just watching like the Tempe crowd and the Dallas crowd and you guys react to it has been super satisfying to watch, because it's that validation that you weren't caught up all in your own artist's head and with your artist friends that were doing all this, just imagining you had something good. It's like, oh no, this is actually, people like it and it's good.
And it's so fun, and apparently this happens like with almost every like cult classic movie you can think of, where 8 million things go wrong and change like on the fly, like on, what was it, Apocalypse Now, where they changed the lead like halfway through shooting it and just mayhem all over the place. Where when you're suddenly stuck with like, we have this horrible problem, how do we solve it? The solution is better than what you would have had if you didn't have the problem to begin with. Like the political commercials, that was Andrew's doing, and we had to do that to fix the fact that we didn't have certain footage to do it the way it was supposed to be in the original script.
Yeah, that was a happy accident, and I, for one, was super happy with the campaign.
It wasn't his accident, like he saw. And the first time he said, we're going to do a campaign commercial, I'm like, what are you talking about? No, we're not. And I was the same way with the fourth wall breaks when I first heard about it. I was like, I completely hate that idea with a passion, and now I like them. But so much of different weird things come out when you have more challenges that it's sort of weird how much hardship creates better creativity in a lot of cases. And there's a bunch of stuff in here. The scene with where Charles confesses to stealing some of the Jones Plantation credits, and there's even layers to that. I intentionally had him steal something that wasn't worth anything, so he didn't victimize anybody else. Anyway, that's a different discussion.
Did he actually steal?
Yeah, he did.
He did.
Yeah, no, he took Jones Plantation credits and said, like, I was just borrowing them and I'm gonna pay you back and stuff. But that whole scene, the guy who plays Mr. Jones, he and I basically wrote that scene on the drive over in the morning, because it was supposed to be, most of that was supposed to be conveyed by Mr. Smith in a different scene. We're like, we don't have time to do all that and do this. And on the drive over, we had to figure out a way to make Mr. Jones explain most of that. And I loved how the scene ended up, and he delivered it perfectly, even though his part didn't exist until we got there, like on the drive over. And so that was, and he just, again, the guy who plays Mr. Jones has never been an actor before. He has a podcast. He's one of the few people who, like, he knew of me and is already on the same page. He has a podcast called The Quash. So he actually knew what was going on. He had never acted before, and Andrew was just like, I bet he can do this. And he was just freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And his delivery, and such a memorable, lovable, hateable character, which makes it interesting, because he's still a slime bag. He's like owning other people. Like, you're not a good guy, but there's something about that character that's just sort of memorable and fun to laugh at, because half the time he doesn't know what's going on either. It's just been us explaining to him.
I actually remember that.
So if I could just maybe follow up with that. There was sort of a Empire Strikes Back feeling to it, where Darth Vader wins at the end, and there's an opportunity for Return of the Jedi. How, like, we see how the trap is set, and now how is the trap unmade? That's what I see for like a mirror to it.
Yeah.
In a sequel.
I very much doubt there will be a sequel to this, but there will be other projects that go into that. I will also mention that so in amongst getting no sleep and doing rewrites every night, and we're both dying on set constantly, I got frustrated with how many things had to get cut to make the movie. Now, in retrospect, Andrew cut everything Andrew cut, he should have cut. Everything he changed, he should have changed for the sake of the movie. But as a screenwriter, I'm like, but I like that, and this subplot, and that thing, and he's like, it's gonna be 8 hours long. So things are getting chopped out, so halfway through, I started writing the novel on set to put back in all the parts that had to get cut out of the movie because they didn't belong in the movie. So the movie is exactly what the movie should be, and the novel is what the novel should be, because I finished the rough draft before we were done shooting. Got no sleep, and my immune system completely collapsed, but I finished that.
Yes, and I was like, you were telling me what you were doing, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, because I needed
Sure,
more work.
don't kill yourself.
Quick, write a novel
Please,
while you're doing
I
this.
love you.
Like what you're doing?
So-
What? He's like, I'm doing rewrites of the script every night. Also, I'm putting everything that's not getting in this film into a novel. So I'm also writing the novel right now. And I was like, are you getting any sleep? And you were like, no.
Not really.
Like,
Hiding in the basement of this like 200-year-old huge house, and people are like having rooms. It was sort of our headquarters, not the one you see, but a house in Natchez that we rented to be our headquarters for all that. And I said, I want the basement. And they're like, you can have a room. I want the basement. So I was in the basement with a snake in a cage and being up all night typing stuff, being a weirdo. But thejonesplantation.com with a "the" on it, thejonesplantation.com is the novel, and it's in the process of being printed right now. To put back in all the things that don't fit in the movie. And every single one, I'm glad it's not in the movie because it doesn't work in the movie. And Andrew's the director, and that's why he's the director, and I'm not. And I knew full well, like, he outranks me. When you're on a set making a movie, you have to have a director, not 7 directors, not even 2 directors. So he outranks me, and, you know, for the movie, his word goes. But that was therapy for me to, okay, I'm gonna go put back in all the stuff that didn't fit the movie.
Well, you guys know how bullheaded Larkin is, so then imagine another bullheaded dude that's like 6'4", only he's the director. So like,
Jimmy
2
Jack-
directors on that movie, in your case,
That would have
definitely
been a
would not
disaster.
have worked. You 2 would have killed each other,
Yes.
so like that.
For those who don't know, Jimmy Jack is the director. That's Andrew.
Yeah, that's our director is Jimmy Jack.
Yeah,
He turned out to be a good guy, right, at the end?
kind of.
He's the only one with a character arc.
Yeah,
Oh.
I'm not sure he got all the way to good, but
Did a good
less
thing.
horrible.
I feel like you could see
Yeah.
in his face that he was changing.
Yeah, and that's the thing I wanted to mention because you mentioned about like what's the solution. In the novel, you hear Sarah's story because she gets away up north because Samuel, I'll just do the spoiler, was saving up money all this time to pay Jimmy Jack to get her out. And so in the movie, that subplot had to get chopped down to where all you see is he like picks her up to comfort her and like, don't watch him being whipped to death, please. And in the original script that was in there, and there was a narration and everything, but that didn't fit. But so there's more of a happy ending in the movie. But Andrew and I both knew early on, and I said like, Samuel has to die. There can't be a happy ending, and there's a very specific reason for that. Way too many movies people can watch and go, yay, the underdogs won, yay, what's for dinner? I want them to go, the bad guys won. And it was in real life, and they're still there. Crap. And you can't do that with most happy endings. It's not supposed to be a feel-good movie. So I wanted this to be uncomfortable for a lot of people to watch, where they go, specifically, they're not sure they wouldn't have been cheering for Mr. Smith, because I think most people would. Because he looks good, he's saying nice things, and it sounds like we're in charge and we're free. And who's this guy telling us we're not, and ruining our party? That's most of human history. Exactly.
Next question.
I perceive that you know that it wasn't really about black and white. You
Yeah.
made it that way for Westerners.
Yeah.
And about the cotton, you made it that way for Westerners.
Yeah.
And it's about mind control and human nature.
Yeah.
And oh man, you did a fantastic job. From my perspective, there was nothing funny about it. It's about real life.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder how I was even be able to be born in this insane asylum. It's like fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And it's a giant magic trick that's been pulled over all of our eyes.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of us have just like been sucked right into it. You know, and so thanks, man. It's a great project. You know, we keep up with you, and couldn't have come out any better. Thank you very much. So, I hope someone's taking this and we can rewatch some of it on YouTube. And we keep up with you and Mark Passhill and all your other buddies.
Thank you very much. And I actually use the analogy of a magic trick, and in a number of talks I've given, I point out if somebody does a trick and you go, ooh, ah, and then they turn around and show you how they did it, you go, oh, okay, that's how you did it. Trick doesn't work on you anymore. And what I want normal people, the main thing I want normal people to get out of watching this movie is they watch it and they think about stuff and they go out in the real world and they go, oh shit, I know that trick. And I know that trick. I've seen that before. Oh man. I want them to see through it in real life. And I think it's going to be rattling around inside people's heads to the point that they can't not start to notice the parallels and go, yeah, I would fall for that, as demonstrated by the fact that I already fell for that in real life and cheered Psychos into power. Yeah, and if people are going to assume it's going to be about black and white because it's a slave thing and that's what, you know, Western culture does all over the place, I'm fine with that, with them going into it assuming that and then finding out it has nothing at all to do with that. And that's one thing we decided early on. This was actually my idea. This is not the case in the little animated thing I did, but early on I said Smith should be black, so it isn't just the poor black victims and the white evil people. And the secondary reason for that is he's one of you, only he's a sociopath and he figured out how to control the rest of you. So it's that makes it sort of extra slap in the face that's, you know, it isn't just, well, this is the bad group and this is the good group. And to have the visual and the image of like, there's the whole spectrum. I gave a speech to the whole cast on the last day of shooting because I said, I know it might not be all that fun to act in a movie where the bad guys win and everybody and the good guys cheer for the bad guy and horrible stuff happens. And I said, the point of most movies is like feel good, make you go rah rah rah. Everything about this movie except Samuel is representing one form or another of human failure. From the all the way calculating sociopath, Smith, to Jones and Johnson, who are beneficiaries of this profoundly evil institution and just go along with it, all the way down to like Noah, who's the one who's kind of Samuel's buddy and he tries to run for office, which doesn't go too well. And then he sort of...
You mean the LP?
And then he sort of backs off and doesn't do anything, and the others who are cheering against Samuel. The whole spectrum of people failing to stand up for what's right, because if people don't get hit to the full spectrum of, not only is this most of history, but you, the viewer, are probably on that spectrum somewhere, failing humanity. And I want people to not feel that great about themselves if they go, yeah, have I been falling for some of this crap? Because, and the thing you mentioned about it, like nothing was funny about it, that's something that early on Andrew said, like parts of this are going to be funny. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's the most demented subject imaginable. And he was right in a very weird way. Like there's sort of a release in recognizing the truth in something that's heinously evil. And so it's sort of this awkward humor which I sort of like, because it also makes people uncomfortable with like, oh yeah, that's what we're in and it's horrible. And at the same time, there's sort of a release of people being able to laugh at how horrible it is. Not like, oh, this is okay, but like, oh, we really are that fucked up. And so it was a weird thing that Andrew foresaw that, and I didn't.
You know, it's going to be a dangerous movie once it gets out there. It's going to be very dangerous.
Yeah.
Keep your wits about it.
Yeah. And now that it's out there, like, they have
People have
less
so many theories about you.
Thank you. So my initial comment was actually a little bit addressed already, but I appreciate how in the opening scene you have this antagonist that we're all off the bat not attracted to, and this subtle flipping of polarities throughout the film, particularly with him, where at the end, you know, relative to Mr. Smith, he is, you know, so much more compassionate and sane. And I also just wanted to comment on how I appreciate some of the anachronisms you put in there, like with the flag, for example, just the way, you know, it's a flag made in today's age. And I think it also, not only is it quirky in a really positive way, but I also think that it helps tie in the realization for people who might already have their eyes open to bringing it, this indentured servitude, into you know, more contemporaneous times, where it's like, oh yeah, this is actually us. I mean, you've got flags like that all over the place these days.
Yeah, and the fact that the film doesn't even have the feel of a period piece, even though most of the visuals and stuff is sort of matches the period. And should I say it? Well, in this group, I'll say this. I won't say this publicly loudly because I want to see how many people notice. I want to see how many people, normal people, watching it at the end, where it pans over and says Jones Plantation and is showing the American flag flying. I want to know how many normal people are like, duh, they didn't have that flag back then. We know. I'm sure somebody will point that out.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
So, in the scenes where the slaves are reciting their Pledge of Allegiance, obviously it was written on a piece of paper and hung up, but the slaves, like American slaves, were notoriously not taught to read. So how is that possible?
Because they would hear it over and over again. Smith would read it to them, and then they notice the first time they did it, they're like awkward and out of time, and like half of them aren't remembering it, they're stumbling along. So they'd have to hear it over and over again. He does have it on the plaque printed out, but he reads it out to them, and then he leads them in the pledge every time.
I don't have a question. I just want to mention that that's the second time I see it, and I picked up a whole bunch of new stuff in there. So yeah, congratulations on hiding all kinds of different things. That was pretty awesome.
Thank you. See if you notice more on the third round.
At the very end, when the one slave pulls away, maybe that was Noah. I kind of lost track of Noah. Was there more cut out, or will he be talked about more in your novel?
Yeah, that gets covered a lot more. The thing with Noah and Samuel, and the going back and forth of who's going to stand up, and his talk and his speech of like trying to get into power, and then like if you notice. And this was another scene. I'm like, why don't we show the election? Because there was a scene in there, and he's like, it actually works to not, because Smith said we're going to do this for a while, and then Johnson's going to win, and then he just does. Like the election didn't matter. Like that was a foregone conclusion. And watching it didn't matter. I was like, yeah, kind of have a point. But in the novel, Samuel and Noah are standing in line and talking to each other on their way to vote. And I won't say what they said, but yeah, in a novel there's so much more time to cover all sorts of back and forth in the details and all that fun stuff, which is why I had to quit writing a novel at the same time.
Quit writing a novel.
So, first question is this, have you guys had any talks with any film festivals? How will this kind of be getting out there to, and hopefully spreading, other than the fact that everybody who does this is telling everybody that they know and sending the link, and hey, I'll even buy you a copy. And a related question after that.
Okay, we're trying to use the old-fashioned normal way too, to get it talked about enough that we're also going to have it on streaming services soon, one way or another. There's one we might actually run it on for free that focuses mainly on pro-freedom stuff, and then have it for a few bucks on Amazon or whatever. To us, because of the message and because of the nature of the thing, we're not going to go beg movie companies because they're never in a million years going to back this thing. But we happen to be in a time when the mainstream stopped being the mainstream, because people like Joe Rogan have an audience bigger than like all the major networks combined. So what we want is to have those people watch it and talk about it and completely bypass the normal way of getting people to learn about stuff, because we don't have a huge advertising budget. You don't have any budget for like anything. Oh, I should ask this for people who don't know. What would you have guessed was the budget for making that movie? That's his question.
250,000.
Yeah, 250,000.
200,000. Good guess.
Holy crap, you guys are actually great. I did not expect that.
Production was about 50 grand, and then post-production included, I think it added up to 170 or something. 20 grand of that, Andrew put in himself. The director put threw his own money in it. He was like, we need to finish this year. So that's how much he believed in it. And so I was really, and lots of people have said, wait, you did that for that little money? That level operation? So I'm really thrilled with how it came out. And I could never have done that, which is what.
It looks like a $1 million movie.
Yeah.
So $200,000.
Not even that. In total, including post-production. But for production, I think we were only at like 50 grand when we shot it. And then it was stuff. So that was just.
I mean, and the Liberty community did that. It was Indiegogo, like the film website version of GoFundMe. So it was just a crowdfunded movie that a lot of the Liberty community was piling in, and we were promoting it. And it was being funded. There were quite a few big, timely crypto donations that the timing worked out to help too. Script was a very part of the movie and all that stuff.
And lots of miracles had to happen, and mostly Andrew was the main miracle because he had a bunch of connections that the director of photography found was just amazing. His assistant Doug said, "I'm going to do this for nothing," because we were like, "We don't have money, so I'm going to do it for nothing."
Doug is Master Morgan who got shot.
Yes.
As in, he shows
the
the
flashback.
flashback and he kills his master. Doug is actually Andrew's like right-hand man. Like Doug, it was basically Andrew, Doug the whole time, and Doug did this whole thing this whole time. On
Also,
volunteers.
that was shot in Andrew's apartment in Phoenix.
Oh, that scene was shot in his apartment?
The setting is close enough that you can't even tell. And that was shot after the fact. Like, we have to do something about the flashback, but we don't have time right now. So there's so many miracles. I'm not sure how many things I'm supposed to be spoiling by telling you how we did them. It wasn't nearly as plain as it looked.
Get the luxury of this private screening to know things that other people don't know.
So there was a lot. As the microphone. Oh,
So you more or less hit on my follow-up, which was, let's say somebody in this room has an idea of a, let's say something else that is a lot of people would enjoy, but is not going to get funded by Hollywood realistically, because it has, pretty themes that people aren't going to, the mainstream isn't going to fund, whatever.
Right.
Is that so? Is the answer get the screenplay down and then lean on the crowdfunding and like kind of show it to people? How did you do it? Because you said you were finishing aspects of the novel, so you had the whole screenplay done. How does the marketing kind of work?
Yeah, well,
something you want to do?
We started the Indiegogo, and all we had was the little animated thing I did ages ago, and the people who know what I believe and know what I've been talking
Your
about for
audience,
27
basically.
years. And I'm hugely thankful that many people were like, we have no idea how this is going to turn out. Here's some money.
A lot of people believed in you to start because they didn't know anything about Andrew. So a lot of trust in this community went into, Larkin says he wants to make a movie with some guy named Andrew. Here's some money.
Yeah,
and that was a lot of money thrown at them to do that.
And we didn't have a script at the time. All we had was the little animated thing. And as soon as we were like, are we going to do this? Like, actually try it? And then immediately I dove into writing the script and stuff. But we didn't even have that first. So I have this hugely unfair advantage of a number of people who know who I am and supported it just blindly. Like, I hope this is good. And I didn't know what it was going to look like either. I'm not a director, and it wasn't my thing, but I had faith. I knew Andrew was going to be, like, have the same message. That's the thing. That's not, there's no compromise there.
And you knew he wouldn't sell your script.
Yes. And someone did offer to buy it. We said, nice joke, get lost.
Yeah, there was a big production company that was like, oh, this is a fabulous script, we will take it and make it into a BLM thing.
Andrew didn't bother to ask me because he knew the answer would be, get lost. So, yeah, so most of the time I would say all the way having a script to pitch at people would be the first step to do, which I'm trying to do with some other projects too. Because it was a number of flukes, including Andrew throwing some of his own money at it, that had to happen to make this happen. And a lot of people just having like blind faith in us. Well, not completely blind, we had done some stuff before. But having